welcome, 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 welcome to another episode, y'all. We going live here very quickly, very soon. Today's episode, we are talking about, we're on actually reasons number 20, reasons number 47 and 48, which is of day 24 on the 50 reasons to self-publish right now. And we're going to get right into this conversation. Let me make sure I get a few things checked on here and get my notes up here. So as you're coming in to today's broadcast, go ahead and let me know, as usual, where you're coming in from and whether you have published your own book or thinking about publishing your own book. Go ahead and put that on in the comments there. Love to hear from you. Answer all of my own. In the wrong place. I answer all of my own comments there, so that is me live in the chat there with you. And if you have any questions about anything about self-publishing or writing your own book, the whole process of what to do with that, please put that in the comments there below, and I'll be answering those myself again. Also, I'll give you time here once we get through the content. We'll give you some time to go through and ask some questions live instead of typing those in there. So if you have anyone that you know that would like to self-publish or to just publish their own book and have any questions, go ahead and share this broadcast with them. I'm going to get in some great content on, again, reasons why to publish your own book. What's up, Merle? Welcome to the broadcast. We're live right now. Excellent. Now let me get my notes up. And we're going to get right into this, y'all, because you know how I am, man. If I don't have my notes up, we're going to be here all evening. All right, so again, today we're going to be talking about getting on TV and interviews on radio and podcasts, using your book to get into both of these areas as reasons number 47 or 48. So with that being said, y'all, let's go ahead and get started with today's content. And just put me pour into you for a little bit. Can I do that? Can I pour into you for a little bit? That'll be awesome. Okay. So, welcome to another episode of look, the 50 reasons to self-publish right now. Okay, right now. Reasons number 47 and 48. This is day number 24. We're going to be talking about getting on TV and then getting interviews for radio and podcasts. You leveraging the book to get on TV and to get on the radio and podcasts. So let's start off with number 47, which is to get on TV. Okay, now let me ask you this question. If you ever thought about this before, if you just got on Oprah, then you be a world-renowned expert. That's all you need to do just to get on Oprah, and your whole life will change. Now, the truth of the matter is that's a fact. You get on Oprah, your life will change. I mean, just think about how many careers accelerated after one appearance on Oprah. Or the famous TV show for that matter. Just one appearance there on Oprah. Just having Oprah Winfrey mention your book on her show was enough for your book sales to jump thousands. Just having her mention your book or becoming part of her Oprah Suggests. So how do you get on the show, or how do you get her to talk about your book? The first thing is you have to have a book, obviously. And then you have to send her team a pitch. Now, that doesn't mean that Oprah will ever see or read the book, so don't make it the only show that you pitch to. And I'm not going to hear you talk to you about how to get on Oprah, but just how to get on a TV show, period. Now, a side note, as we're talking about getting onto TV shows, or getting on the TV, I should say, the person interviewing you on TV probably won't read your book, so don't be offended by that. It's not their job to read your book and know everything about what you're going to talk about. Their job is to pull the information out of you. Okay, so don't be offended if they don't know about everything about your book before the show. You're going to give them points anyway. So getting on your local news station is an effective way to broadcast your book, to get some promotions for your book, to get some publicity for who you are and about your business. So have you ever thought about that? When I see on certain people's websites, I see as seen on. And I always wanted to know, how they got onto those TV shows or how they got interviewed. I have some mentors who show these on their speaker reel. They show these clips of them being interviewed by the local news station, and I'm just like, how did you get on the news station? Like it's always, I want to have that on my website. So we had to start figuring out how to get that done. How do you get on TV? Now there's something about being on TV that validates your expertise, right? And the news wants to interview experts. And your book validates your expertise for the TV shows. So do you see how that works together? Where you write the book to validate yourself to the TV shows, and then you get validated even more, and your book does because you're on the TV show. So write the book. Keep a lookout for stories in your city that you can provide insight into, and then contact the local station. And remember to mention the book you wrote about the topic. I'm going to say that multiple times. Remember to mention your book, because people get so excited about being on TV or having that interview that they don't really plug their book. And this is the perfect opportunity to plug your book to thousands, if not millions of people who over the course of time will see your interview and hear about who you are and what you do, how you serve the world. So how do you get on airtime? All right, so how do you get airtime? The first thing to do, obviously, is to research the emails and phone numbers for your local stations. You want to find the producers and the newscasters who are doing these interviews and have their own segments. Second thing to do is to send emails pitching your perspective on relevant newsworthy events. So things that come up in the news, you want to make sure you're pitching those things in the news. And typically for you're talking about TV shows, it's very current. You're not talking about past issues. You're typically what's happening right now. And because you're pitching, you're keeping aware of what's going on in your city and the local news, you're going to pitch your book for relevant items that are happening in the news right now. Now, you might use this opportunity to launch your book also. If the timing fits, if there's a lot of things going on in your local market that's dealing with, let's say, dealing with drugs, because that's what's been happening over the last couple of years, is the growth of drugs, right? The proliferation of drugs, the pandemic of drugs. And if your book is about your path through recovery or being a drug counselor and helping people to get into recovery, your book pitching during that time frame would be a great segment to help someone to find out how to change their life in those moments. It might be something that you're talking about. Taxes. You may be a tax expert for business, and so you have the recent changes that are happening in the government, where changes of taxes have changed for corporations, and you wrote a book on how to better prepare your business for the tax breaks and how to use tax season effectively, right, throughout the whole year. Create a lifestyle of tax changes, and you wrote the book on it. So now you piggyback off of the events that's happening in the world right now. Okay, that's kind of the ideas on how to use your book to get in there for relevant news. The third step is to follow up repeatedly with phone calls. Phone calls, yes. I know as a writer you may not want to be on the news. You may not want to get on the phone and talk to people, but it's one of the best ways for you to stand out outside of having a book, but to stand out in the minds of the producers. They're getting emails and pitches and all types of things that are happening in their email box constantly, with people trying to tell them about all types of theories they have about life and or about who did what in the city. And for you to stand out, you got to repeatedly contact them. And one of the best ways to do is to follow your email up with multiple phone calls. Number fourth step, send your book to the producer. So once you've got this contact, you established contact with your email, you followed up and left voicemails. Now it's time to send your physical copy of your book with a message in there directly to that producer. Now they have it. It does not mean they're going to read the book, but when they see the book and they see the physical book, again, it separates you from everyone else who's pitching to them, let me be on your show, let me be on a show, let me be on a show. So send your book to the producer. A secret tip to that is, if you have the address, which you should have done in step one, for these producers and local radio station, local news stations. You can go directly onto your Amazon and send your book as a gift and have it wrapped in Amazon packaging, because now it goes directly to the producer, and when they open it up, it's specifically to them. No one's going to open up a gift directed to someone else. So that's the way to bypass everyone else who's sending packages to the producers to get yours open, right? There's a little tip just gave you for free right there. Finally, you want to keep your segment, once you get your spot, keep your segment concise and noteworthy. And here's what I mean by noteworthy. You want to think about sound bites. Sound bites that people remember you for saying. So these are your little catchphrases and ideas that your little wordplay that you may use. You may have had in your book a great chapter title, or something that you highlighted in your book or put in italics or something in your book. You want to use that little phrase in your interview. So you have your own soundbite. When you go to put it on your website, boom, you put your little clip on there that refers back to your book, something you said in your book, and you have your little highlights on your website that says, oh, read more about this segment of the interview. Read more about this in your book, right? Buy it down below. Okay, so have some sound bites that are specific to you and separate you, stands out to people's minds, and they'll remember you for a long time. Now, finally, I'm saying it again. Please, 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 before your interview ends, you usually have an opportunity to say something about who you are and what you do. So please mention your book and where viewers can purchase your book. Do that. Now, it takes time and a lot of effort to get onto the news, more than likely. So build your relationships and nurture those relationships. And you may find yourself, if you follow these little steps of being concise, being noteworthy, and having those sound bites, that you may find yourself having a second and third appearances on the local news or local TV shows. Okay, so there's reason number 47 for why you need to self-publish your book right now, is to get that spot on TV and expand your reach, expand your validating what your business does and what you offer to the world. Okay, that's good. That's good. Go back and rewind that, review that, and start taking those steps you want to get on TV. Reason number 48 is interviews and radio, interviews on the radio and a podcast. I'm going to talk about myself here a little bit. See, my first podcast interview came as a result of selling a book to my friend. So I sold a book to my friend, and then several months later, after he had purchased the book, I gave a training at the co-working space that he ran. Now, he was the owner of this co-working space, and one of the people who was renting space from him was having an event there, and I was the keynote speaker for that event. So after this event, about a week after the event, he invited me to his podcast to talk about my book. It was a great opportunity to get out there, and at the time, I didn't know I should have my book. I didn't think that kind of through to have it in my hand. I had the book on me, of course, but I didn't think to have the book in my hand, because it was a video recording of the podcast, along also with an audio version that went out as a podcast. So there's something to think about. Learn from that mistake. Have your book with you if you're going to be on the camera, right? So it took several months before I began to intentionally start using my books to book podcast interviews. See, I didn't connect the dots at first, but then I didn't connect the dots at first, y'all, about using my book in order to get on podcasts. I was just trying to figure out, how do I even get on a podcast? These people don't know me. I don't have this big blogging platform. How do I get on a podcast? And it seems like these people are all like prolific writers and authors and things of that nature. How am I going to stand out? Why would they choose me? I didn't connect the dots at first. Then it was a question of what shows do I want to pitch? Because I didn't even know what shows I want to pitch once I decided, I wrote a book. I'm different. I can separate myself. And I started looking at how often my book got me booked on stages on interviews. So then I followed that. My next question was on how to contact these icons. Because again, in my head, these were icons. I mean, let's face it. I didn't know that these podcasters were just normal people with family and real world struggles. Now, they spoke about these kind of things on their shows, of course, but I still felt that they were above the problems of the peasants and peons who are their listeners. Now, I know that sounds silly, right? I even tried to make it sound more outrageous as I said it just now. But the truth is that the fear has a way of like igniting the imagination and then magnifying the simple challenges in your life until they appear to be these great walls that are hard to overcome and surmount. But the process I used was simple, and here it is. You want to tell the podcasters again. You got to research and find the emails of the podcaster. They typically have a way to email them. They talk about it in their podcast of ways to get in contact with them, and they typically have on their websites. There's a way for you to submit your pitch to be on the show. Okay, so you want to find that, and then in that process, when you start submitting, you want to tell them the highlights of your story. You want to talk about how your story will help their audience, which means you need to make sure the podcasters that you choose have an audience that's going to need what you have to offer, what your book is about, right? So when you're pitching, you talk about how your story will help their audience, or the book you wrote will help their audience, and then give them a copy of your book and your speaker one sheet. That's just a simple 3-step process. There could be a little more details to go along with that, but at a high level, you want to highlight your story, the talking points of your story. You want to talk about how your story is relevant to their audience, and then send them a copy of your book and your speaker one sheet. That can be as simple as sending them a PDF copy of it, or whatever format you want to send it to them. Or an audiobook version of them, because of course these are podcasts, so they probably want to listen to it. So that might be a better place to do it, just send them a copy of your audiobook, and then your speaker one sheet. Okay, and you can go again a step further and send them a physical copy of your book to stand out. That might be your next step. If you don't get called back or get a message back immediately, send them as a follow-up, a phone call, or send them a copy of the book, as we said for the TV shows also. Now that sounds easy, right? And now, it is kind of easy to do these things. But getting on other people's podcasts is not the only way that podcasts can work in your favor. It's not the only way to be someone on someone else's podcast. See, podcasters need people to interview, and your book separates you from the rest of the wannabe guests, okay? And you don't need a PR team like you might need for the TV shows. And you probably should be using for your book appearances on TVs to get a publicist, okay, or public relations company. Now, the other thing about this is you have a greater chance of getting on a podcast than you do getting in the newspaper. And not surprisingly, there are more percentage of people of the population who listen to podcasts than that do read the newspaper. So it's a great idea to get in the newspaper, but it makes more sense to get on a podcast because more people are listening to podcasts than they are reading the newspapers now. And that gap continues to grow. And as the proliferation of audio shows continues to grow, there are going to be more chances to be on podcasts, to be more relevant, and to reach more of the world by getting on podcasts than trying to get in the newspaper, although newspapers is still a good place to be. Now, adding to because obviously newspapers are now having their own podcasts, right? So adding to the growing number of podcasters is the increasing demand of audiobooks. You continue seeing this correlation. There's more people listening to audiobooks because there's more people listening to podcasts, and more people are listening to podcasts because more people are listening to audiobooks. So you should have an audiobook, and it's probably a good idea to have a podcast. I'm gonna come back to that in 1 second. Now, because of the intimacy of podcast interviews, you have the opportunity to have a discussion about your favorite topics, and guess what they are? You and your book. You get to talk about them for as long as the podcast goes on, the interview goes on. Now, couple that conversation that you're having with the opportunity to sell your books, to sell your products and services, and then to announce your platforms. And you have a marketing strategy that's previously would have taken months or years to develop. And you can do this within weeks and getting on someone's podcast. Okay? So take advantage of this opportunity. That is reason number 48 for a reason to self-publish right now, is to get onto a podcast and separate yourself from everyone else. Now, don't be ashamed to use a publicist that's networked. Again, a publicist that's networked if you're not willing to put in the work that we just talked about. Doing the research to find the TV shows and the emails, doing the work to find the radio hosts and finding their emails and contact information, or the podcasters and their email and their information. If you're not willing to do that work and continue to connect and send messages and follow up with calls, if you're not willing to do that, then it's best you find a publicist that's networked that will do that for you. That's their job, is to get you booked on these shows. Now, on the other side of being a guest is being a guest on these shows is being the host of your own show, right? As a podcaster or a radio host or the host of your own virtual TV show, you further position yourself as the expert in your industry. Now, guess what you talk about on your show? It should be easy. You know what to talk about on your show already. You talk about the content from your book. Okay? You talk about the content from your book. You already have it. Several authors have turned sections of their books into episodes of the show where they're just sitting on there and reading from their book. In essence, their podcast or their radio show became an audiobook. One person in particular that stands out right now is Brendan Burchard. He literally took his book, he read it, read chapters of his book and turned it into a podcast episodes, and then continued to grow his podcast from there. And every episode he talks about go buy the book. It grew an audience from using from the content of his book. Now, why would he do that? Because it grew his audience. You may think, well, why would people go buy the audiobook when they can get it for free? Because they want it all in one place. That's why. And because they want to support the author. That's why. And they still go and buy the physical book. They still go and buy the digital book. Even though all the content is for free out there, it still works to build your platform. And because, think of this, the book is one way to do what? It's opening the door to people coming into your world. So whether they get the book for free as a digital book, or they get a few chapters, it's not about making a bunch of money off of selling the book. It's about selling a whole bunch of books so people come to buy your back end products. So giving the stuff away on the podcast is just fine, because now they become listeners, can indoctrinated into your philosophy, to your ideas, and then they start buying more of your stuff, which is the point anyway. Now, the idea I'm talking about here, by using audiobooks and then taking it and creating into a podcast, is about mastering the art of repurposing your content, like the big media houses do. And here's what I mean, and I close this episode with this. Turn your book into an event, and then turn that into a show, and then turn that into evergreen products. Here's what I mean. We take Harry Potter. It comes out as a book. It becomes a movie. The movie turns into multiple things, such as T-shirts, action figures, and all types of other stuff outside of that. Okay, let's go to Marvel. We have comic books such as Spider-Man and the other Marvel TV shows or movies. The comic books become TV shows. The comic books become movies, and the movies become TV shows, and the TV shows become all types of action figures and T-shirts and everything else. Who's to say you cannot do the same thing with your nonfiction book? It goes from your nonfiction book, it becomes a production, an event, a seminar that you may record. Now you continue to sell that, and then it becomes a long-term series of shows, TV shows, podcasts, or virtual shows, or however you want to put it out there, perform it. And then you have multiple back-end products, evergreen products that you continue to sell because you put these shows out there. It's the same thing that the big movie studios do, and you can do it yourself because of the internet. All right, with that being said, I have one thing to ask you. Have you written your first book yet? And if you haven't, I'm going to give you opportunity to start that process of writing your book. In fact, what I'm going to give you, this guide is actually going to give you everything you need to write your first book without having to go anywhere else on the internet. You just got to follow the guide. Now, you can grab the signature book writing guide at bit.ly/my signature book. Again, bit.ly/my signature book. If you like, you can go ahead and use your text to 678-506-7543. Again, 678-506-7543. And you're going to text my signature book, all one word, put it all together, my signature book, and I will send you the signature book writing guide, 10 steps to go take you from the beginning of your idea, figuring out how you're going to profit from the book, writing the book, getting the covers, all the way through to publishing it and using it to start getting books. As we talked about today, on interviews, on radio shows, on podcasts, and getting on TV, it's all on there. Simple outline for you to start getting your book done. All right. So with that being said, y'all, do we have any questions about anything we said today? Or any other questions regarding book publishing, writing, authoring, becoming an author, anything we said in the other episodes? Go ahead and put it in the comments right now, or we're going to wrap things up. Hey, I see you out there, Alicia. Welcome to the broadcast. Thank you, Carisha, for putting that on there, putting the link out there. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions before we get off here? I'm going to give y'all about 15, 20 seconds. I know it takes a minute for y'all to type the questions in. Mr. Norway, welcome to the broadcast. I see you out there on Periscope land. All right, Mr. Norway, since you just joined there, do you have any questions about self-publishing or writing your own book before we sign off? We're just wrapping up here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. As always, you can be, you can do, you can have anything you want in this world. You just got to believe. You can live a life of no doubt, just blessings. And I'll show you how right here. And for all you no doubters out there, all of you are part of No Doubt Nation. You know what to do. You know our mantra. I want you to say it loudly and do it proudly and make life happen every day. God bless. I love you. And I'll talk to you next time.